Okay, welcome back, folks. Yeah, we're going to do an interesting, some content this time. Interesting little, I've waited for the right time to do this because I wanted to, put a lot of thought into it because you see these all over the place, for the past decades. You're always seeing these sort of top 10 lists of players with the top bands, different genres, instrument. So I do want to touch on this. But mainly because the sense that I think we're and it's noticed by a lot of musicians and others that are, have been watching and listening for a long time, that there's usually a lot of people missing from this list. Some just, without any under any reasonable recognition that should be given to them. So I'm gonna not just point out some that are missing, but obviously I am gonna do just legitimate as within my personal bias and my history of guitar players in the past, whatever. I'm not gonna go back I'm gonna go back to whenever they were around. Could be 70s, 80s, 30s, 1940s, and I'm gonna do it in different genres. There's gonna be obviously some limitations. You have to sort of. There's players that strictly do solo. So without saying it, I'm going to look into the top 10 guitar solos, and I'm going to have to really pinpoint, what I'm looking at here and what I'm not looking at. So generally, I'm looking at solos. I am going to try to do it within a group setting. I'm going to try to do it outside of just the rock genre. This is a long-winded way of getting around that because it is a very treacherous topic once you get into a top 10 lists. And I just I want everyone to know that I spent a pretty good amount of time going through not only the guitar players themselves, just to break it down like, okay, this person definitely should be in the top 10. Now let me find the solo that I think best would put them categorically in their top tier lists and solos, and why. But let's look into just briefly what makes a great solo. You could break it down as simply as it when you hear it. Let the music do the talking. That's certainly one way to hear it. But generally, we look at a great solo in the past. If we look I just brought up the top 50 solos that we think of, and I'm not going to do all 50, but I'm going to do some of the ones that stand out that you're typically going to hear in these top guitar solo. You've got, and this is in no particular order, but you probably will recognize it as some order. But you've got Maggot Brain by Funkadelic, Flying a Blue Dream, Satriani, Thrill Is Gone, B.B. King, 'Cause We Ended as Lovers, Lenny, SRV, Crossroads, LaGrange, Firth of Fifth, Limelight, which that one I put it in there, but I can't disagree more. That's one of my least favorite songs of Rush, but it's that's just whatever. Something, Beatles, Layla, Cliffs of Dover, Still Got the Blues, For the Love of God, Black in Black, Back in Black, Highway Star, All in the Watchtower, Beat It, Freebird, Sultan of Swing, Sweet Child of Mine, Hotel California, Stairway to Heaven, Comfortably Numb, and Eruption, and Bohemian Rhapsody. So, those are all very reasonable and stereotypical songs that we consider. Those are obviously mostly in the rock vein, aside from a few. So, just in that starting, that's a very biased top 10 list on basically just guitar soloing typically those are probably all in the 1970s, most of them. It's a very small section of guitar solos in that period. But I would consider them, they're really good solos. I get them. I get why they're in the list. But there are some that I'm going to put above those, and some that are lesser known that should be in the list, should be in the top 10. So keep that list in mind and say some of those maybe should be in my list. A couple of those I would normally put in my list, but I'm not going to, for reasons of just that they're so stereotypical, and for reasons that I think these are certainly up in the category that these should be. So, a long-winded way of saying, but I think it's going to be an interesting list. So, what makes a great solo? Energy, tone, dynamics, melody, phrasing, development, building, sometimes maintain interest, climax. It should have a broad and lift the piece as a whole, showing more clarity to the individual voice. Should you have one foot in the song and the rest of the body speaking the heart of the piece? Good backing music, that goes a long way. What's playing behind it to let it sort of have that peak. Let's get to the music. So this is top 10 guitar solos of all time in mostly any genre. So let's jump to it. Number 10. I'm going to add this guy just because I feel like he should be in the picture. He's a very interesting guitar player, and he will be in the rock genre. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about it too much, and I'm going to play the whole song. Some of them are very long songs, and there's a lot of other solos. But, let's just listen to the whole song. If you want to skip ahead, you want to hear the guitar solo and jump around, you're free to do so. Let's jump to it. Number 10, guitar solos. Let's do it. Cool intro already.
We all are fighting the same fight. We all are in the same war. We all are in the same revolution. Got to know what you're fighting for. We all fight the same fight. We all are in the same war. We all are in the same revolution. Got to know what you're fighting for. Yelling and kicking, trying to stay alive. All the time, the eyes on the prize. But does anybody hear my breath? Tell me something, do I qualify? Just the same, what they're talking the same old game. Tell me if I'm just like you, why can't I do the things that you do, huh? Well, if war's the key, what door it open? Is peace the answer? What's the question? Well, war is hell, peace is hell, love is hell. I have had it with you. Wow, what the hell? When I dream, my mind soars, but no fantasy can pay my bills. Another dream unfulfilled. for. We all fight the same fight. We all are in the same war. We all are in the same revolution. Got to know what you're fighting for. Fight the fight. In the war, in this revolution, you got to know what you're fighting for.
Vernon Reid. I could pick a lot of his solos. His solos come in all different shapes and flavors, different styles, different techniques, and they always have like a different, but he's got a voice. He's got a universal voice to his playing, and it's very spontaneous, very fluid. It moves around a lot. It doesn't follow the same trajectory as a lot of solos prior to 1990. You look at, it's very more melodically sensed. It's not with a lot of trickery, except for, obviously, kind of in that sense, it kind of reminds me of Hendrix, that you don't know what he's going to pull out of the bag. A lot of guitar players after this, they play in much more of a melodic sense, very diatonic, and it's more about the pentatonic scale. What are you doing with it? What are you doing with this scale? What are you doing with that scale? And he, does some of the same, but it's also uses very atonal. He's not worried about necessarily being in this feel-good spot. So anyway, there was definitely, when I first heard him, when I was coming out of high school, in the 90s, it was basically the two players that astounded me the most was Vernon Reid and Ty Tabor from King's X. There was other good players, but nobody else struck me as like they're breaking any new ground. So Vernon Reid definitely, for me, was like, okay, he's doing something outside the box, but still fits in these genres that he's playing, whether it's rock music, funk music, soul music, punk music. They kind of hit a lot of different flavors. So that was, for me, something to pay attention to. I should say, Nuno Bettencourt too. Extreme kind of hit me over the head a little bit, obviously, for guitar players in that period, and it's kind of waned a little bit for me over the time. I hit their first couple albums, and kind of honestly, same with Live in Color. Their first couple albums I thought were very strong, and after that, I just kind of slid off the I didn't see the same strength, the same adventurousness in their playing. But it could be. I didn't listen to it. I sort of went off the path a little bit, so there certainly could be stuff out there that it was like stands up, holds up. I will defer to the people who actually listen to more of it. But for me, first couple albums, obviously great solos to me. Anyway, came out in 1990, August, their second album. This is Fight the Good Fight, one of my favorite tracks off this album. I thought it stands real strong as a song. Great lyrics, content, it's positive, and loved his solo. It's got the shredding, which some people don't like. You sort of have the effects, you got the technique, you got the feel, in a lot of different styles. So I'm going to put this, Vernon Reid, for me, stands, he should be in the conversation for greatest guitar players of all time. And his solos, it's not just for his playing, his rhythm and everything. To me, his solos stand up in that box too. So I'm going to put him in the top 10 that I can think of. So, born in 1958. In the first album, he said he purposely turned off the rhythm tracks and just sent the bass and drums when he recorded Cult of Personality. He did that in the first take. He wanted a very raw edge. Because there's something very out of control about his solos. He's like not every hair in place kind of player, as he would say, and that's something I liked about him too. He was not didn't play it safe. He let his improvisation sort of take take a lead role in his playing, which is, a scary place to be. And not every player is like that. So he said right now, a lot of people are playing very diatonically and modally. Even the arpeggios sound diatonic. He said, I incorporate that as well, pentatonic, chromatic, and whole tone ideas, and I like to experiment with moving tonal centers, which I learned about while working with Decoding Society. So I have not listened to them. Decoding, that was a group that he played with before, prior to Living Color. But yeah, I like that he's, he throws different styles, jazz, punk music, and other styles into his tonal center, let's call it. My best solos come when I get into a stream of consciousness and there are no stylistic considerations, like now I'm going to use some two-hand tapping, now I'm going to play a hip-hop bebop phrase. It's all very enmeshed, and I like that about his playing. There are times when you can feel yourself thinking things out, but for the most part, if you're in touch with your capabilities, ideas will begin to flow. What musicians don't realize is that as you play over a long period of time, you pick up a lot of things. If you could unlock what you've learned from the time you started playing, you would be amazed. That is an interesting concept, yeah, for sure. We just we feel where we are right now in the moment. We don't see all the things and how they've evolved and been incorporated into our playing over time in little ways and big ways. What I question are guitarists who use techniques to make themselves invincible, and I'm going to blow you away with my chops attitude. The real battles are within yourself, not in impressing others. 100%. And I'm only going to bring this up because this is someone who may or may not be in the list in the future. I get an emotional lift from his work because I can feel him searching and reaching out. There is a bridge between technique and emotional commitment. And that's true. It's a combination. A lot of people say, oh, he's too technical, too emotional. I like one or the other. It's like, obviously, there is no one or the other. It's all combined. You have a lot of technique, and then you still try to get that through an emotional commitment sometimes. Or some people are more technique, but they may feel an emotional connection to it, but the listeners may not feel that emotional commitment. I view a solo as a conversation during which I strive to make interesting statements. That is very much what a solo, what a song is. It's a conversation between instruments. He's reacting to the drums and the bass in big part. He's reacting. He's having a conversation with them. I dread moments where I fall back on rote licks, and in rock there are plenty of them. But when you use those same licks on an unconscious level, they can work. Yeah, so I love his ideas, how he thinks about his playing. He's obviously put a lot of thought into his playing in general, and how he can strengthen it over time, and what he puts into it, and what he's hoping to get out of it. And that's something that we don't think about when we think of playing. We think of practice, but a lot of it is the philosophy inside yourself, how you're thinking about your playing, what you want to get out of it. And a lot of it is things not to do. What do I need to? Why am my fingers are doing this, but I wanted to do this. You need to open up your head. Everything comes from inside, so it's not just the techniques. Eventually, those are all just the technique that you get, but how do you unleash it? How do you open it up? How do you expand it? Because those things can increase your abilities, but they can also take away from other abilities just as much. So anyway, some things that I really loved about him, basically, as I said, I love his atonal abilities. I like his sort of virtuosity, even though some people will look at his playing as being somewhat sloppy with the faster things he plays, but that's in reference to the time of other players who were playing these, say Yngwie Malmsteen, someone who were playing these, super clear, super clarity arpeggios where you can hear every note from note to note. You can hear the separation of them. And he creates, he's more of like a blurred lines, I'm putting it into he's kind of like a Coltrane stream of consciousness, Coltrane, just a barrage of sound versus, you're hearing every note in my scale. So his dynamic sound palette, and his drawing from like punk, jazz, funk, rock genres in general. So anyway, Vernon Reid, love his style. Even I had a guitar in one of the main guitar stores that I used to go to when I was first playing guitar for the couple years, and I remember him at the front desk saying like, yeah, I don't know, it came up, he was like, oh, who do you like? I was like, oh, Vernon Reid, among others, and he just did not like Vernon Reid. Thought he was just too out there, too sloppy, too this, too that. And yeah, I don't know. I took it with a grain of salt. I was like, I don't know how, for players nowadays at that time, if you're going to pick out players of the early 90s, late 80s, I should say, into the early 90s, yeah, there's no shortage of rock guitar players. That was the apex of, just what you got over and over again. And a lot of them they just sounded the same to me. They just had, one step away a version of all that stuff. It was just so cookie cutter, which everything can fall into that in any given time. Any music will become cookie cutter in one sense. There's always going to be, thousands and thousands of copycats. As Charles Mingus said, if Charlie Parker was a gunslinger, there'd be a lot of dead copycats. But Vernon Reid did not. He stood out from the pack, for sure. So, top 10. Anyway, let's go into the next one. So, top 10 guitar solos, starting off with Vernon Reid. Throwing shots fired. Throw in the comments what do you think about this choice? Where would you put him in guitar solos? Would you put him in great guitar player but not in his solos? Would you put him in as a great solo but not necessarily your greatest guitar players? I'll probably do a second part of this because I really want to hear what the audience thinks about some of these or all these choices. So this will be my section, and I'll definitely be a voice for anybody else if there's some mixture of content that you feel is missing, and you get enough people that believe that. I'll definitely do a part 2 to this and do some other stuff, because there's certainly stuff I haven't heard. I've tried to minimize that, and there is some, because even in the top 10 list, top 50 list, there was some Genesis in there that I was like, okay, I probably have heard that, but I haven't spent enough time doing that. So let's move on to the next one. All right, number 2. Let's do it, though. I'm just going to jump into it. We'll talk about it later. That bass is strong. I probably could have tried to take the bass lowered a little bit in the mix. It's really booming. But, oh man. Stand up, but you can really hear those fingers. All right, we're going to pause it right there, and then we're going to jump back into it. I just want to say, this is Byrd from, I believe I'm not sure the location, but it could be Newport, July 4th, but it was a 1968 live recording for Jazz for a Sunday Afternoon, Volume 2, The Guitars. So this was already sort of picked out, as a highlight for guitar soloists in the jazz field. It was 68, so there was some variation, obviously. So what is obviously different about this is that it's basically a classical guitar doing a popular tune, Chim Chim Cheree, in a sort of in a waltz, but also with this sort of Brazilian flavor, which he became sort of infatuated with, well known for in that field. But he's also not doing it strict. Obviously, he's doing American and South American sort of fashion. He's doing a lot of different things where he's doing and also playing fingerstyle jazz, in a popular tune. So this one has it sort of hits a lot of interest. There's a lot of interesting things that he's doing with this, and a lot of interesting takeaways. So we're going to jump back into it here. I'm going to kick it back just a little bit into that bass solo and watch him come back in. And here we go. Okay. So yeah, some really cool harmonics at the end. Love to see this live because just watching him, manipulate all that would be really interesting to see. And it's cool. It's live. He's not playing it pristine. He's, putting in a lot of work over, 7 minutes. And, he's playing fingerstyle, so he doesn't have that sort of, he has accuracy and pristineness with his fingers, obviously, but doing a live performance, sometimes that's not the major idea. You're trying to get across a feeling, you're playing with the drums. But I think it's cool. I hear him, he's moving across here. Some notes are stronger than others, some kind of little faint issues with him. But overall, and the cool thing is also he's he's using a lot of different techniques. He's using, the multiple fingers, doing the arpeggios of the chords. He's doing a lot of movement with the chords, so he's using a lot of different methods to get across this sort of melody of the song. And he's bending notes in there. He was bending notes. That is not typical, obviously. That's, he's playing sort of blues a little bit in this to get across these sort of feelings. So that's also very unique. You're not going to see in strict classical players, obviously, bending notes in classical guitar. So, yeah, very cool. So, Charlie Byrd might not be, but yeah, his earliest and greatest influence was gypsy guitarist Django Reinhardt, whom he saw perform in Paris. And this one I love it because there's a lot to say. It creates a really wave of ebb and flow dynamically. There's a lot of changes in sort of single note, lowering it and then building up with the more frantic pace. And there's always a strong feeling with the chordal melodic sense of this particular piece and this improvisation. So it doesn't seem like he's playing a lot, but I never feeling like, going over the same old ground of things he was doing before. It always feels kind of fresh, for a so long solo. That's hard to say. Most if you heard a lot of these other players on the list, play for a 4-minute long solo, it can start to get a little overdone, a little, treading the same territory. So that's something that, in different spans of time, it becomes increasingly difficult to sort of maintain that interest, let's say. So, Charlie Byrd, my number 9. So you got Vernon Reid, and then, 30 years prior to that, Charlie Byrd doing his version of Chim Chim. I don't know who the other players on this. I would love to know who the bass player and drummer was, but I could not find that. This was on a compilation of great guitar solos. It was live, but they didn't keep the records that they do nowadays. So don't know who they were. Anyway, let's jump into the next one.